Hello, everyone. I'm going to get started. My name is Alejandra Arguelles. I'm one of the program coordinators at the Idea Center, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. Welcome to today's WISE presentation topic on mastering the in-person and virtual interview. Today's workshop is being recorded, so feel free after this presentation. In about a week, it will be posted on YouTube. But in the meantime, I will go ahead and pass it on over to our guests with ServiceNow to lead the presentation.
Thanks so much, Alejandro. Hello, everyone. Welcome. We are so glad that you could all join us today. We are excited to be here and certainly excited and passionate about today's workshop topic, mastering the interview. But let's go ahead and start off by introducing you to the ServiceNow team today. I will go ahead and lead us off. My name is Mary Ann Gordon. I am currently located in Wenatchee, Washington, which is about 2.5 hours east of Seattle. I am an early in career engagement lead. I have been with ServiceNow for a year, but I've been in the tech industry for about 8 years.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. It is a pleasure to be here. My name is Lauren Martinez, and just like my colleague, Marianne, I too am an early in career engagement lead. Been at ServiceNow a little over a year, in the tech industry about 6.5 years. And I currently sit outside of Houston, Texas. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you all for having us this afternoon.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lindsay Ritchie. I'm one of the senior technical recruiters at ServiceNow on the EIC team. And I sit in the Bay Area of California. So I am remote, but my home office, if I do go into the office, is our headquarters located in Santa Clara, California. Happy to be here today.
Hello, so I'm Brianne, and I am also a technical recruiter, and I sit in the San Diego office. Well, back and forth. I'm in the office a few days a week, not in the office. So just depends on what I feel like when I wake up. But yeah, I'm down in San Diego, right next to UCSD in the office, right there in UTC.
Awesome. Thank you, team. So we do have an action-packed agenda today. We will start off by going through a little bit about who is ServiceNow and what we do, how to prepare and navigate for any type of interview, whether that's in person or virtual. And then we're also going to touch a little bit on how to prepare and navigate for that technical part of the interview process, right? And of course, we definitely want to open it up to some Q&A, and we'll have that opportunity to do so towards the end. We will ask you to hold any questions that you might have until that time, and then we'll try to get through as many questions as possible. And finally, we will talk about ways to continue to stay connected with us. Next slide. Okay, so let's dive right in. Who is ServiceNow and what do we do? ServiceNow is a strategic platform for any digital workflow that creates great experiences and unlocks that productivity. We make the world of work better for everyone. That is our mission and that is our purpose. It really helps us to understand why we do what we do, why we want to come to work every day, and why you should want to come work here, right? Our Now platform excels at digitizing work that flows throughout a company and across several functions in a unified experience. And that is why we call the Now platform the platform of platforms for business solutions in all workflows. On top of our platform, we offer best-in-class, out-of-the-box workflows for IT, employees, customers, and creators that orchestrate work across the enterprise and are unique to each industry. Next slide.
Awesome. Thanks, Marianne. So now that you know a little bit more about who we are and what we do, I'm going to take a moment to kind of talk about our values, because our values are just as equally important as what we do here at ServiceNow. And it really just is a huge indicator of who we are as a company. So the first is wow our customers. So at the focal point, at the center of all things, of course, our customers. They are the center of our world, and really why we work so tirelessly to make sure that they get a seamless and amazing experience each and every time that they're working with us. Our innovation, of course, is very integral to their success, our success. And so we want to make sure that we are, pleasing our customers along the way and wowing them too, right? The next is win as a team. So when candidates ask me, Lauren, how would you best describe the culture at ServiceNow? And I always talk about this level of collaboration and working in teams, and everything really is about, teamwork really does make the dream work. So we really do share a lot of the same goals and, have these roles, and we understand that together as a team, we're going to achieve those things. So we want to make sure that we are driving results, working effectively and efficiently, and we're doing that in a team collaborative environment. The next is going to be create belonging. So diversity, equity, and inclusion are the table stakes here at ServiceNow. And belonging is that breakthrough that we really focus on. So we are constantly always leading in our work environments with empathy, which means always actively listening and acting so that we feel that we are home here. We can bring our true authentic selves to work each and every day. And that's what makes this place so unique. It's the best part about you. And then lastly, is stay hungry and humble, which I think is probably my personal favorite. We're always finding new and innovative ways to push the bar, to break through those ceilings, and always be better and do greater things. So our best work is what we're doing next and thinking about the next big thing. So that's why we firmly believe in staying hungry and staying humble here at ServiceNow. So to kind of get things kick-started into today's topic of, in virtual and in-person interviews and the technical piece, I like to kind of get a little bit of a temperature check of the audience in the room to kind of get a better feeling of how we're feeling this year. And all answers are welcome. Feel free to put your thoughts in the chat box or come off mute and share those with the entire group. But just kind of get an understanding of how's this season been for you from a recruiting perspective? What's been working out? What hasn't been working out? Just to kind of see everybody's thoughts and feelings. And there's no right or wrong answer here.
Yeah, don't be shy.
Okay, so for a second-year student who's never applied for any interns or labs, the feeling is confused and worried for not getting started early enough. Okay, it's been great. I got an internship. That's awesome. Tough for me because of no prior experience. Understandable. Okay, thank y'all for sharing some of these different feelings. And I completely understand the recruiting process can be super tedious and very complex and overwhelming at times. I was there too a few years back. And so kind of navigating and learning best practices to stand out is going to be super helpful as you're navigating this recruitment process. So that's our hope here today, is to try to kind of alleviate those feelings. And we'll definitely have a lot of time for Q&A to address and answer any questions or concerns that you might have. So let's start off with preparation. So kind of like for a big test, a midterm, a final, you always realize that you got to go in there well prepared and study, right? You wouldn't go into a test without studying. So the same thing really goes for both in-person and virtual interviews. You want to try to, really put your best foot forward. So the first thing we're going to talk about is at the top of this little diagram is resume review. So you want to make sure that your resume is up to date. Make sure you utilize all the resources at your disposal to really have someone look over it, whether that's the Career Services Center or a friend or a peer, or maybe someone within an organization that you trust to review it for you. Sometimes we look at it so much that we might miss something so small as like a grammar error. So have somebody else take a look at it. And also understand that you could possibly have multiple versions of a resume, and that's totally fine. Make sure that you have a resume that really fits the role that you're trying to pursue. So multiple resumes are totally okay. The next is going to be interview prep. Of course, the sooner you begin to prepare, the better it's going to be. It can seem really overwhelming to prepare for an interview. So let's break it up into some sections that make it a little bit more easier for you to digest that content. A great way to prepare yourself for interviews is mock interviews. Maybe have a roommate or a friend or a peer, or maybe a professor or a TA that you really trust to practice a potential interview and some of those potential questions that you could face in a situation. The next is going to be company research. Company research is pretty critical. You really want to do your homework here. What are you looking for in a future employer? What are their mission, their goals, their values? Also think about the role that you're applying for. How are you a fit? What are some things in your previous experiences that really resonate with the role that you are interviewing for? Also, keep in mind that just because you might not have the exact experience, maybe that perfect internship the year before that is a good match for that role, doesn't mean that you don't have those skills from other types of experiences. Think about what we call transferable skills. How are things you've learned in other opportunities applicable to what you're trying to pursue? Always think about those things to make yourself a high contendant for that opportunity. And always remember that the interview process is a two-way street. Just as much as we are interviewing you to make sure you're a good fit for the role, you're interviewing us to make sure that we're a good fit for you. Next is going to be that elevator pitch. Practice that elevator pitch to have handy, typically about 30 to 60 seconds to sell yourself. Be intentional and straight to the point. Why should I hire you? Always have that question. Why should someone hire me? That definitely helps in preparing that elevator pitch. And what I always like to say for continued preparation is as you're going through the motions of preparing for your interviews, whether that's in person or virtual, if it's in person, confirm the office address and location. Are there COVID policies in place at that office? What's the parking situation like? For virtual interviews, be sure to install all programs that are necessary, check out your equipment, have alarms set so that you join early and not late. You always want to join those interviews a little bit earlier than expected.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lauren. Great tips and tricks. So I want to talk to you about some things that are consistent across both virtual and in-person interviews, because without even realizing it, there are a lot of similarities that can cross through both types of the interview processes. The first is going to be body language. So for both in-person as well as a virtual interview, you want to sit up straight, no slouching, and make sure you have proper camera placement for the virtual interview. Next, you want to avoid using fillers like ums and likes. I think sometimes that can really show a lack of preparedness on your part in those situations. So the more you practice, the more aware you will be. And that's a really great way to just think about avoiding those ums and the likes, as well as those really long pauses that happen. So by practicing using transitional phrases like in conclusion, after all, as a result of, in addition to, there's so many of them. So phrases like that are really going to help you fill in those gaps so that you avoid the ums and the likes. Avoid getting too comfortable in an interview setting. So no slang and no checking your phones. I mean, our phones are such a part of us now, I think sometimes that we don't even realize what we're doing. So be aware and remember you're still having that proper interview process. As part of body language for a virtual interview, as an alternative to shaking hands, always greet your interviewer with that genuine, warm smile, a wave or a nod to the camera, and make sure that you look in the camera. Eye contact and looking into the camera may be one of the most important things you do during a virtual interview. For in-person, you're going to want to shake hands with the interviewer at the beginning and at the end. Make it a really strong, confident handshake with that interviewer. These are all super important body language cues for in-person and virtual that are going to help you to begin to establish that relationship. Next is rapport. So how do you separate yourself from others? you're going to want to build a personal connection with your interviewer. And the best way to do that is to utilize the power of LinkedIn. Look for ways that you're already connected to that interviewer. Maybe you went to the same school or played the same sport, or maybe you were just part of the same organization, just on different campuses. So really look for those connections, and that's going to help establish that rapport. Authenticity. Ask yourself, as Lauren said, why are you the best person for this job? You're really going to want to practice your active listening skills to show that you're paying attention, staying focused and engaged. And always have those follow-up questions at the end of your interview. The worst thing you can do at the end of the interview is say, I'm good, I don't have any questions. You want to make sure you have 3 to 5 questions, and make sure that they're meaningful questions. And what do I mean by that? It's make sure that you have thoughtful questions for your interviewer about information that you really care to know more about. And as a recruiter, as an interviewer, I can tell you, we can tell when someone's just asking questions for the sake of questions. And it's just not a really good look, right? This is your chance to showcase your intellectual curiosity. So be curious, be clear what your character is and what you bring to the table with your passion and your willingness to go that extra mile. Stay present with that person. Bring your passion and bring your you. And lastly, follow up. Ask your interviewer or recruiter for their email and follow up with a thank you note. Thank your interviewers for their time shortly after the interview. I like to say within 24 to 48 hours is a good time. Make sure to hyperlink your LinkedIn account to your signature if you haven't already done so, right? So we're using a virtual platform so heavily because of COVID-19. The more ways you can get exposure to your resume, the better. So exposure to your resume, your background, your skills, your experience, that's going to be super helpful, and that's going to really give you that exposure. And it's a great way, and the great way of doing that is by hyperlinking your LinkedIn account to your signature. And of course, if you're going to do that, make sure your LinkedIn account is up to par and up to date, just as you would your resume, because just as LinkedIn can be helpful, it can also be hurtful. Next slide.
Awesome. So now I'll take a moment to talk a little bit about how to make a good impression in a virtual interview. So days before your interview, you're going to want to check a couple of different things. So first and foremost, let's go through technology, right? So your camera, make sure you've kind of cleaned that off, wiped it down. You don't want it to be blurry or smudgy. Test out your microphone settings, make sure that it's clear, you can hear yourself. I always like to recommend to wear headphones if you can. It really helps kind of cancel out any background noise that you might have, whether someone's mowing the yard or there's a pet around or traffic outside, whatever the case may be. Headphones really do help kind of cancel that out. Software programs. If you need to download any type of software programs like Google Hangouts or Zoom or Microsoft Teams, go ahead and do so. And like I said, definitely try to test out this equipment a couple of days in advance. And if you run into any issues, if you're having any problems, be sure to let your recruiter know well in advance so they can assist you in trying to sort those issues out. And of course, test out your internet connectivity. There are lots of free ways of doing that online to make sure that you have reliable internet connection. The next is going to be attire. Even though it's a virtual interview, you should still dress the way you would for an in-person interview, just for the job that you want. Not only that, but it also kind of gives a boost to confidence when you're in that business professional attire. So definitely attire remains the same. It's just in a virtual setting. Next is going to be preparedness. And what I mean by that is definitely have written notes. instead of having your notes on your computer screen. And the reason I say that is because you're already on your computer, you're utilizing Zoom or Teams or whatever platform it is to communicate with your interviewer. It's really distracting, more so for you than it is for us to be clicking back and forth between maybe a Word document with your notes and then the actual platform that you're using to communicate with the interviewers. So it's a lot easier. Have it out in front of you in pen and paper, the old school way, and feel free to jot down notes as you're going through the interview. No, it is not a bad thing to look away from the camera to write down notes. If anything, that just shows that greater level of engagement that you have in the conversation with the interviewer, that you're really interested in what they're having to say. And of course, we always say you'll get the best results if you take time to prepare in advance. So definitely do so. And then lastly, let's talk about a few distractions. When you're doing a virtual interview, you definitely want to find that ideal spot in your home. Find a neutral wall behind you. We definitely want to focus on our conversation between you and I and not what's going on behind you. Play with lighting so that you have that ideal lighting and we can see each other as well. Avoid animal sounds. I know lots of us have our furry friends at home, but if you can have someone look over your pet, kind of keep them distracted a little bit, that's also going to make it a lot easier for you too, instead of feeling where like, oh my gosh, they just heard my dog bark, those sorts of things, just to kind of alleviate the nerves. And lastly, and I'm guilty of this, if you're an iPhone user, if you have an Apple Watch and your Mac and your phone and all of our different notifications are interconnected with each other, make sure you silence all of those things, turn those off. Again, I think that's more so a distraction as an interviewee than it is as an interviewer. Nothing is more distracting than giving an answer. You're on a roll, you're super confident in what it is that you're saying. And then next thing you know, you get that little notification on the corner and it's a text message and it just throws you off your game. So better to be prepared. Just put those all on do not disturb and turn them off before you get started.
Okay, so let's just touch a little bit on how to make a good impression for an in-person interview. So as far as location, always remember to be punctual for an in-person interview. You want to make sure that you're showing up early. And my rule of thumb is 15 minutes early. And it's going to show that you're prompt and you're prepared. It really says, look, I have beaten traffic on the 405, or I guess in your case, University Ave, and I'm ready to go. And it's a perfect way to say that you are a reliable professional. Make sure to confirm your interview time, your interview location, which room you're meeting in, if you need a parking pass, and be sure to ask about their COVID policies, because COVID policies are going to vary from state to state, building to building, company to company, so make sure that you ask those questions. As far as your attire, show up dressed, ready to impress. Being confident and bring your best self always. Keep it business professional. So for your professional brand, think about how you want to market yourself, right? And remember that those first impressions are key. You're also going to want to bring paper and pen for notes, which is going to show that you're engaged, your active listening skills, and then be sure to bring copies of your resume. So by doing these few simple things, you immediately show interviewers you are a person who prepares for their responsibilities. And finally, just remember to breathe. You guys have this, and as I like to say, that stand on your interview platform that's being offered, whether it's virtual or in person. Bring your passion and scream your dream so that we hear you. Next slide.
Okay, everyone. So Brianne and I are here today to give you all an overview of how technical interviews are conducted at ServiceNow specifically. We're only going to cover ServiceNow because every company, I think, does it differently. And this will hopefully give you a good overview so that you have a general idea about this portion of the interview process and how it's conducted at ServiceNow specifically. So our goal is that, again, this will make you feel more prepared. So I want to just start by giving you a a quick overview of how the technical interviews are conducted. One really important thing to note about our technical interview process at ServiceNow is that it's not universal across organizations or departments. However, there are general themes and similarities across the functions. We do have a dedicated team of technical recruiters. There are 6 of us, and each technical recruiter works with a specific organization within ServiceNow. So for example, I support digital technology, which is formerly IT, and Brianne works to support UX and also systems engineering. So there are several other departments, of course, that hire technical roles, and that's what our other, our team covers all of those departments. So as a general rule of thumb, if you do decide to apply for one of our openings, of course, you apply on our website, and then our dedicated team of technical recruiters will review your resume, and a recruiter will reach out to you to schedule a recruiter phone screen if your resume meets those minimum requirements for the role, and if we think you would potentially be a good fit. So we will reach out to you to schedule that. If that phone screen, and that's usually about 30 minutes long, upwards of 30 minutes, if that recruiter phone screen goes well, then the recruiter will let you know, and then we will schedule you for the final round interview, which will consist of at least 1 technical interview, but most teams will want to do 2 technical rounds. So you'll be scheduled with usually one person, unless it's panel style, but again, it varies by team. They will also ask you, so the interview will start with the interviewer usually introducing themselves. They might tell you more about the role, and then they're going to ask you to review your resume with them. So they're going to ask you to walk them through your resume. So that's going to be talking about your experiences, whether you've had another internship or another role, or maybe you haven't had the chance to have a role, but you would still want to talk about your projects that you've worked on. From that point, they usually will, cater their questions to what you've talked about any experience you've had or any projects you've worked on. They may also then ask you questions related to your knowledge of algorithms and data structures. And then they will usually ask you to solve a coding problem. Some teams do use tools like HackerRank, or I've heard LeetCode, I've heard a couple others. Some do not, okay? In fact, most teams do not, but there are a few that do. At the end of this portion, so once the actual technical round is done, you've worked through problems, you've answered their questions, then they will ask you, hey, do you have any questions for me? And as Marianne did point out earlier, asking questions is really vital to success, and I do also recommend that you bring questions, to your technical interviewers. So, what Brianne and I want to talk to you about today, what's on the slide, is our tips for success, things that we think for you to maybe keep in mind if you are going to apply with ServiceNow and interview and do a technical interview. So our first tip is be prepared to talk in detail about your resume. So why this is important. Interviewers are not only looking to assess your technical abilities, they are also looking for clear communication skills. So being able to clearly communicate what tools or software or programming languages you've used is very important to our technical teams. The other reason why this is important is because the interviewer will usually cater some of their technical questions to what experience you have. One example that was given to me recently by one of my technical interviewers was that if someone mentions that they've created an API, then they will ask the candidate, okay, so walk me through that. How did you create that API? What did you use? What steps did you take? So again, the more information that you can, more details about your resume, or any experience you have or projects you've worked on, the better off you'll be. Our second tip is don't be afraid to ask questions to the interviewer during your interview. So why this is important. Our interviewers are looking for candidates that are inquisitive, especially when they get stuck somewhere or if something doesn't quite make sense, but they're also, they also love to be a guide for you to work out the solution. Generally speaking, a lot of candidates, the feedback I've received is that a lot of candidates who do not get an offer. At times, it may be because they got stuck and did not ask questions. The interviewer maybe felt like this showed a lack of collaboration skills and a lack of wanting to learn. On the flip side, folks that, candidates that do ask questions during that technical portion of the interview, they show that they want to collaborate, that they're not afraid to ask questions and they want to learn. The interviewers are also looking for problem-solving skills and the ability to work as a team. Again, our value, one of our values at the company. So I've heard this feedback from time to time from interviewers, and so just want to help you out, give you some tips for success. Being able to ask questions and show the interviewer that you possess these skills is something that Brianna and I thought was important to note today. So now I'm going to let Brianne review the other tips with you.
Yeah, so the next one that we bring up is that most technical interviews, and again, we're talking about ServiceNow, not other companies, but most of our teams, majority of our teams, they will allow the interviewee to choose whichever language you want to answer the coding questions in. So for example, I work with 2 different orgs. One org, they will ask a coding question that is either based on data structures or algorithms, and they'll let the interviewer choose what tool they want to use to answer in, as well as what language they want to use to answer the question as well. On the flip side, on my systems engineering side, some teams have very specific questions that are related to specific softwares, and they don't really go through a coding question where you can choose your language. It's more answering verbally about how much you know about, say, like Linux or Python, things like that. But for the most part, most of our teams, they're open to you guys choosing which language you want, so you're comfortable in the interview. And most tools, they can be transferable. So if you know one scripting tool, they believe that you can learn another. And so the next one, I know Marianne touched on it, but asking questions at the end of the interview. I love getting questions that kind of stump me. I've had people ask me in my recruiter screen, tell me something that I wish I could change about my job. And that one, I don't expect it sometimes. The most common questions I get are, what is the culture like? Or what do I like about my job? Which they are great questions, but definitely have more. Because you can ask me those questions all day long, but what I like about my job is not going to relate to an engineering team. But asking those questions that make the recruiter think a little bit, those stand out to me, and I'll remember those. On the flip side, when you're in the technical interview with engineers, definitely go prepared with more tech-related questions for the team. Some of my interns have asked are, like, what are some pain points on the team? And that gets the engineers thinking on like what could be better. A lot of questions, or a lot of interns will ask, what has helped past interns be successful, which is a great question to ask the technical team, because then they'll talk about their past interns and what they worked on and how they worked with the team. And then in your question, in their answer, they'll give you more insight into the internship as well. So definitely go prepared with some good questions for your recruiter and the technical side. And get creative with it. And lastly, ServiceNow, again, specific, but recruiters that you work with will give you specific details on what the team will be like when you interview with them on the technical side. So like Lindsay was saying, each org is a little bit different. They work a little bit differently. We're trying to make a cohesive process, but we hire, I think, 200 engineering interns every summer. So it's a lot of hiring managers to kind of wrangle into one spot, but we're working on it. But as of right now, each team's a little bit different, but the good thing is that there's a dedicated recruiter for each org, and they're going to be a subject matter expert for how their teams work. So say come fall, you apply to one of our roles and you talk to a recruiter and you get a technical interview, you'll never just blindly be sent into a technical interview. You will have good instructions, good details about what to expect. once you join that call with the engineers. And that kind of explains our technical interview process. There's a lot that goes on, but we are here on the call to answer all of your questions about like our interview process, our recruiting process as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Brianne. And really quickly, for the sake of time, I'll get through this pretty fast for all of us. But yes, as Brianne and Lindsay have both touched on, you have a dedicated recruiter in this interviewing process for a reason, whether that's with us at ServiceNow or with another company. They're your point contact throughout that experience. So utilize them. If you have a question or concern, that's what they're there for. And so don't be afraid to ask those questions. So really quickly, we're going to talk about the STAR method here. If you haven't heard it before, that's STAR, situation, task, action, result. Lots of companies utilize this more on the behavioral side of questioning within an interview. So situation, introduce the situation to set the scene and provide context. Task, what tasks were involved in that situation and why. Actions, what actions did you specifically take? And result, what were the results of those actions? Explain the benefits realized. The great purpose of the STAR method, it really is a way to answer resume-based interview questions that provides me, the interviewer, with clear, concrete, and concise answers, where you're giving us more specific instances where you're able to kind of showcase your specific skill set and those qualities that you possess. So that's a really great way to kind of showcase your abilities. It's a way that we form questions in a way that prompt you to answer in this method. So always think about ways to kind of tell that story, tell your previous experiences, versus providing the recruiter with very vague, broad answers where we kind of have to peel back the layers to learn more. Kind of set us up, tell the story of all of your experiences. Next, you'll see just a couple of examples of what those STAR method-like questions, those behavioral questions might look like. So give me an example of a time you faced a conflict while working on a team. How did you handle that? So you start kind of getting the idea. You're giving me a situation, explaining the tasks. What actions did you specifically take? And what were the results because of your actions? Tell me about a time when you made sure a customer was pleased with your service. And lastly, tell me about a time you were under a lot of pressure. What was going on and how did you get through it? So these are just a couple of examples of STAR method questions. But again, as you kind of notice the way the question is formed, it really kind of forces you to answer questions in that method. But it's really great because, again, it gives us bigger picture. And with that being said, we definitely want to have the remainder of time to open it up for some Q&A. So feel free to actually share those questions in the chat box or come off mute. And I'll actually go into the chat box to see if there are any questions already. So will slides for today's event be shared with us? I believe, Alejandra, there will be a recording available for students. Oh, there she is, answered it right under. And Victor asked, why are written notes better than notes on my computer? Great question, Victor. As we kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, it can sometimes be pretty distracting. Sometimes students don't realize that if they're typing responses while the interview is conducting, we can hear all of that. It gets really loud, it's really distracting. So I definitely would recommend just having your notes out in front of you and writing things out. And like I mentioned, it is totally okay if an interviewer is watching you kind of like look down and you're writing notes. It just tells me that you're engaged, you're actively listening. And these are notes that you're taking down because it's important to you. So it kind of just alleviates some of those distractions between the conversation by having them out in front of you versus going back and forth between Word documents on your computer screen.
Lauren, I see a really good question I'd like to address. What kind of project should a new grad work on to compensate for the lack of experience? So that's a really good question. And I think there's really no easy way to answer it because there's no right or wrong answer to this. So What my managers, I can just give you an example of what the hiring managers in digital technology sometimes are looking for. I even actually worked with our application development department. So app dev works on web-based applications. So they're going to be looking for, have you created a website? Have you worked on anything related to that? For digital technology, they're going to, and I believe JavaScript experience is in there too. So have you, worked on a project that is going to give you some JavaScript experience. However, some managers are just going to be looking for anything, any projects you've worked on. They may not be looking for anything specific. So again, some teams are looking for maybe some specific experience. Maybe Brianne can probably touch on this in a minute. Also can back me up here and talk about her teams. But I would say in general, just list projects you've worked on in class. Personal projects are also good too, just to show what kind of experience you have. What software have you used? What programs have you used? What tools have you used? And and that also sometimes shows us what you're interested in. I would also always suggest to put to include if they are more of a front end, a back end, or a full stack position or project based. That's my 2 cents on that one. Brianne, did you want to add to that?
No, that's similar to teams that I've worked with. I mainly recruit for interns, but for full-time, it's really just knowing what's on your resume and adding in, say you've been like a tutor, a TA. Make sure that's on your resume as well, because that also shows like teamwork, collaboration, some kind of leadership. So it shows that you did work. It might not have been a software engineering internship, but you do have some kind of teamwork experience in a role versus just project work on your resume. I saw a question on here about if you have a question after the interview. I always say email the recruiter. I welcome questions afterwards. I do that all the time, where I'll be talking to someone in a meeting, and then the second we hang up, I'm like, oh my God, I forgot to ask them this. So, and that actually brought up something that I wanted to tell you is, I just had this moment of, I forgot to say it, and now I'm remembering because you reminded me about sending thank yous, because you said, or as part of the thank you, which thank you notes are great. I talk to so many students. I always remember who you are. I have this weird memory skill to remember all the interns' names that I talk to. I don't know why, but for technical teams, thank yous are great. So if you interview with engineers or a hiring manager, even if you don't have their email address, none of them give them out. Don't let that deter you. Send that thank you note to your recruiter, because the recruiter will then send it out to the team. I love sending thank you notes to the engineers. And it also makes them remember your interview. So once you send that thank you, personalize it as well. Don't send a short thank you for the interview, like I enjoyed my time, I love learning about the company. Everybody knows you like learning about the company, enjoying your time. Throw in some personal detail and say you meet with a panel of 3 engineers, send 3 separate letters. With a personal touch on each person. So when they're talking about taking notes, take some notes about something. I've had an intern send me thank you notes to me personally. And in our interview, it came up that she's on the row team and or on the sailing team. And she asked me if I ever sail in San Diego. And I told her no. And in her thank you note, she sent a link to a sailing club that has like free days. And she was like, I hope you get to go on the water. And it made me remember her. So definitely add a personal touch to any thank you note that you send out.
And I think I saw a question about why we think that maybe somebody was not contacted after they interviewed. Because I didn't view your resume, and I don't have any personal experience with your resume. Bijwajit, I believe, is who asked that. What I can say is we get thousands of resumes, thousands. And so it's hard for us to go through every single one of them. So it could be that your resume may not even be getting looked at a lot of times, unfortunately. So it's a little insider information for you all. So I guess my recommendation is, yeah, connect with us on LinkedIn. Try to use your connections and network to see if that will help you to get your resume seen. And if you know anybody that works for any of these companies, also maybe see if you can apply as a referral. Because a lot of companies do have that option. I know we have that option at ServiceNow to see if a candidate has been referred to us by an employee. If you don't know anyone at any companies, don't fear. I actually talk to a lot more people that are not referrals than are referrals. So it's literally luck of the draw sometimes, because again, it's a numbers game and we just have so many resumes to look at. And I know we're not the only company like that. Like I've worked at other companies where that was the same case. I hope that helped.
Awesome. Well, guys, we are right at time, but before we let you go, Lauren put over into the chat box all of our contact information and how you can connect with us on LinkedIn and help build your network as well. Thank you so much for joining us. We enjoyed the conversation and the questions that you all asked. We hope, that being said, that this was super helpful for all of you, that you got some tips and tricks out of it. Lauren, do we have a QR code?
Actually, I went ahead and posted the link into the chat box. So we always appreciate any feedback that we can get. So if you could takes about 60 seconds, click on that link and complete that survey for us so that we can get some more feedback on how we can make these sessions more interactive and more insightful for all of you moving forward. So we'd greatly appreciate it.
Great. Thank you so much. And you guys, thanks again for joining today. Make sure to connect with us on LinkedIn.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Awesome.
everyone. And feel free
everybody.
Feel free to add a personal note that you attended this event. That will get us.
Yep.
Thank you all again to our amazing presenters.
Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.